Alice in Wonderland. It's not just a children's story written by Lewis Carroll, it's also a random one off episode of almost every anime ever. I don't know what that's about, but I think it goes to not only is this a childhood story that many of us know and have this nostalgia for, it's also just very colorful characters that anime tropes project onto well. And at the behest of my Patreon subscribers, they wanted me to adapt Alice in Wonderland as a gay reverse harem BL anime. And boy oh boy, that's exactly what I did. So stay tuned as I take you through each of my redesigns for a core cast of anime characters based off of Alice in Wonderland. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the speed draw. Starting with the protagonist of our reverse harem anime is Alistair Kingsley, who is clearly the stand-in for both the normal anime protagonist, but also Alice as a character. And the thing about Alice, I reread the book in order to prepare for this video, is that one, she will never let anybody tell her something that doesn't sit right with her, but she's also so aristocratic. Like, she's very middle class, like, or upper middle class, I guess I should say. And so I really wanted that to kind of be present in the way that I illustrated Alistair. So yeah, his hair is like perfectly coiffed. It's not quite the Rock Lee hair kid haircut, but I wanted him to seem kind of well off. So he's wearing like a nice, like, tailored clothes that fit him very well. They're clearly not hand-me-downs. And yeah, I wanted him to feel like he goes to like a private boarding school that's probably, you know, doesn't worry about money very much. But also, I wanted him to have a little bit of vulnerability and imperfection as well. Like, I feel like that's such a big part about Alice is she isn't, like, conceited. Like, yes, she comes from this place of privilege, but also she is very imaginative. Like, she wants to get lost in another world. She's constantly thinking about, like, trying to get the world around her to make sense. And that only works when she has this, like, childlike wonder to her. So for that, even though you can see I worked on the face quite a lot, like I'm redoing it right here, I settled on giving him a slight gap in his teeth. So he kind of looked like Hogarth from The Iron Giant. And I felt like that kind of balanced him being like the 16-year-old protagonist that's like old enough to be in like a YA romance of sorts, but also kind of has this youthful feel, like he's still, you know, very young and, you know, he's still a kid. He's just 16. He's a teenager. So I wanted to balance that just right. And I have him like looking off in the distance. He's so overwhelmed by this cast of characters. And then you can see here, we have the Mad Hatter, who, truth be told, is kind of the entire reason for these redesigns and this video. I just was enamored when I got the idea one day of like, what if instead of a horrible Tumblr sexy man, I redesigned the Mad Hatter not with a top hat, but with a bucket hat. I love a bucket hat. And also, they're very stackable, which brings me to my next concept. Like, he's clearly this, like, crazed, very mentally ill Hatter character. So I wanted to have this, like, angsty teenage boy, but, like, that is kind of very weird core. So it's not just a bucket hat, but it's like a fisherman's hat on top of a bucket hat, on top of a straw hat. So it's like several different types of hats all on top of each other. That, you know, isn't a fedora and isn't a top hat. And then at the very top of the tower is a nest with the March Hare, because I wanted to draw both the March Hare and the Dormouse as like animal sidekicks for the Mad Hatter, because obviously they're all at the Mad Tea Party, but we also had the Rabbit in the Waistcoat, or the White Rabbit, as a character, and I didn't want to have like two competing bunny boys. Like, that just wasn't the vibe for me personally. And also I liked the idea of the Mad Hatter almost being like a Disney princess in this way. And I imagine that Hatter like sees the world in such an interesting way. I was always enamored by the Tim Burton version of Alice in Wonderland. And I don't know, there was just something so rich and layered about that Mad Hatter that I wanted to kind of bring to the to my interpretation, but still have him young. Like, I wanted him to be, you know, sort of, perhaps he's like 15, and then Alistair is 16, and then the other character I'm drawing now, I wanted to be a year older, which is the Cheshire Cat. So I imagine that he's like 17 years old. And I wanted him to be older because I always felt like Chess, like in the story, he really isn't in the book that much. He doesn't have a lot of page time, but yeah, he just seems so like over it, but still young. So like 17 seems so perfect because it's like you're an upperclassman, you're kind of checked out. Maybe you have senioritis, you're already thinking about like going off. And when you're talking to someone younger than you when you're 17, you're like, oh, I have all the answers and I have all the cards. But really, you don't. Like, you actually don't know much more than the peers around you. But yeah, I wanted him to have kind of that vibe and that feel. And then for the blue caterpillar, y'all, I ignore the pompadour, it goes away. He looks sort of like Elvis at the beginning, which I don't know. I was in a car with my brother and I said, what is a haircut that puts you in the mind of a caterpillar? And he said Elvis. And then I eventually got rid of that completely. I went with like a hood, but I think I get rid of the hood and I just go for a beanie because I wanted there to still be this like motifs of bumps because a caterpillar has, you know, these bumps that go down. And then I made his head much longer because, you know, I felt like I was doing all of these very round faces. And so I wanted to diversify my silhouettes so that if you completely blacked out each character, you would still recognize what they look like based off of what their shape language is. And also he's like smoking hookah. So I imagine that this character is probably also a little older. I don't think hookah has to inherently be like tobacco or drugs like that. I don't know anything about drugs. So it could just be water vapor. But yeah, I just wanted him to be like the cool hippie stoner kid that is also met by Alistair on the adventures. And now this character you probably don't even remember from Alice in Wonderland because I wanted a buff jock. You know, it's a Nathan Long illustration, so one of the men have to be giant and hunky and covered in muscles. I also felt that was appropriate because when watching a lot of reverse harem gay anime, there's always just either a boy who's really, really tall or a muscular guy who is the jock of the group. And so I came across the character, which is the mock turtle, who is part cow and part turtle. And perhaps I was watching a lot of, videos about a certain ship involving a Mario brother and Bowser. I cannot confirm or deny. But yeah, I was like, okay, I'll draw a cow guy with rippling muscles and abs with a turtle shell on his back. It just seemed like a no-brainer. And I think in the actual book, the mock turtle is like a calf, so is a baby. Clearly, this man is not a baby. This is a full-grown bull. And he's like one of the adults of the group who has his other dynamic duo. So the way these ships work, obviously, you have to have him have an age-appropriate match, which will, of course, be the rabbit in a waistcoat or the white rabbit, because this is the equivalent of like Skate the Infinity, where, there's like the cherry blossom guy with pink hair and then the really big buff muscular dude. I just love that. I love when there's two random adults that everybody ships and they kind of are superfluous to what's happening with Alistair. And I like them having this parental role as Alistair travels through Wonderland. Like, clearly the rabbit in the waistcoat is like very type A and is trying to keep things on schedule and is trying to have everything work out well. And if you just look at that bull for 2 seconds, like, he is a himbo. There's not a lot going there. His brain isn't on full blast. I changed the pose for the white rabbit, and you can see I'm doing a lot with like gesturing. I loved having him overlap a little bit with the mock turtle, because then there's this beautiful negative space between all the bodies. And this is a chessboard, so now you can't even tell what I'm referring to, but I wanted it to look like a rabbit hole because Alistair goes down the rabbit hole. But it's a very big part of the story, so having this circle kind of appear in the composition, I was like, oh well, I'm just gonna put a checkered board grass and then the palace of the Red Queen off in the distance. Here I'm drawing the dormouse, who's so cute. Yeah, so I felt like I was really on my A game, y'all. I'm so proud of this illustration. I feel like it's me showing off all the things that I've learned over the course of having this YouTube channel and drawing tons and tons of, yes, attractive men of all different body sizes, but also like having to put a bunch of drawfee characters in one composition. I've been really like honing my craft to make it not look busy or not look, just kind of like nonsensical. And I think this composition, I'm really allowed to like use all of the things that I've learned, particularly because, it's a poster. So it's more up and down and vertical. So I'm able to kind of break out of the horizon that I've been working in so much for most of my illustrations. And now here I'm doing those beautiful, clean inks. I redid them a couple of times because I just wanted, I don't know, I was so precious about it. I wanted it to be good. I just wanted it to be the best that it could be. And I kept like psyching myself out. But ultimately, I think I did a phenomenal job because I really wanted the hair to be so curly and the clothes to be so crisp, and I didn't want there to be any ambiguity for any of the characters. And I love how like wide and big the eyes of Hattie is. That's what I've been calling the Mad Hatter, is Hattie. I don't know, I think he's so cute. I love this teapot, and I like how the dormouse is like coming out of the pot and is holding the lid of the kettle. Like, that fills me with so much, just pure excitement, because it's like this wonderful implied movement. Like, they don't look like these characters standing up perfectly straight in 3/4 view, which I tend to default to a lot of the times. And it was also fun to just like think about their costumes. Like, there's this random garter on the Hatter's socks, and I wanted to have like patchwork and these little like safety pins kind of like clipping his clothes together, because obviously he like sews these hats and is really into fashion. I just wanted to give him like the weirdness and the stitchy unraveling quality so that his outward appearance kind of matches his own internal psyche, because he is mad. He is going through some sort of psychosis. And if I ever explored these characters in a book, who knows what that would be, but there's a lot of mental illness in my family and in my life, so I'm sure I would have plenty to say on that. This is just a beautiful man. This is just the blue caterpillar. Remember how I talked about those bumps that you associate with a caterpillar? Yeah, I put those on the puffer jacket. So yeah, shape language. I'm a genius. Hello. I haven't talked about Chess very much. He's just a cat boy. I like his eyes. They're very different than the normal eyes that I draw, but they're kind of like sagging down. They're almost like how manga draws white boy eyes is kind of the vibe that I went for. But I knew I wanted his arm to be unraveling, because the whole thing about the Cheshire Cat, especially in adaptations, is that he disappears. So the reason why that I haven't forgotten his other arm, but I wanted it to purposely be sort of like disappearing, and have Alistair be phasing through it. But right now, I am currently inking the rabbit in the white waistcoat, and he's just very prim and proper. I love this ponytail. It's not like, it doesn't quite make sense. Like, you would think, oh, it should be small and bushy like a rabbit, but there was just something about the ponytail and this effeminate quality to like counterbalance the very masculine energy of all the other characters. Like, I feel like the Hatter is like a little androgynous, but not really. Like, that's just a weird boy. So yeah, I wanted to have someone that's like preppy and a little more effeminate, especially because the Mock Turtle is so masculine. So there had to just be this like natural kind of balancing of each of the characters. But also, yeah, I don't know. I think about fashion so much because one time I watched this panel where it was a bunch of comic book artists, and somebody said, "Oh, what do you ever follow modern trends in fashion?" And this guy was like, "Oh no, I never do that. Like, I think it's almost important that you're not up to date on fashion and that you want the characters to look universal." And I have never disagreed with someone so hard. My favorite comic book artists are like Babs Tarr, who constantly are looking at fashion and making really interesting choices with costuming. Because if I have to read a comic where Lois Lane is wearing a plain short sleeve t-shirt from like Walmart that's purple, it's like Lois Lane would never buy that. Lois Lane doesn't buy clothes at Walmart. Why is she wearing this weird purple like Fruit of the Loom t-shirt? It's just so strange. It makes no sense, and it really takes me out of the comic. And I know some people don't care, but I care. I notice. And I think other people subconsciously clock that too, because when you look at the new Lois Lane in whatever movie that just came out, yeah, she isn't wearing a purple t-shirt. There's purple motifs, but she's wearing something a woman would actually wear. As I get into the coloring, a lot of this does change. I'm playing around with like the color schemes for each of the characters. I had like Power Rangers on the mind. I always do that. Like, I'm always constantly thinking about Power Rangers or the Sailor Genshi from Sailor Moon whenever I have a cast of characters, because I'm like, oh no, they can't all be the same colors exactly. But then also I want everyone to be wearing like blue or purple. Like I just will randomly go very monochromatic. And what I ended up like wanting but not realizing I wanted was, we have to take a moment for this background. I just sort of whip these colors together. But I wanted the Mad Hatter to be more blue and less purple. So here I'm just doing these inks on the little background details. It's not a fully rendered background for, the plane that they're sitting on. Obviously, I wanted the rabbit hole that you're kind of going through that's like this window into Wonderland to be the main focus. And I literally just exported in pictures of a real chessboard because I wanted the proportions to be right. And then I kind of just like roughly sketch in chess pieces. And this is a real chess game I played. I was black and I was playing against white, and it was just so iconic on my chess.com that I put it literally in the illustration. But here you can see is when like I said, the Hatter becomes blue. Oh my gosh, and we're almost at the end of the video, y'all. This is the last thing I do is the disappearing arm. And so I wanted it to look like this shredded ribbon that's sort of like ripping throughout reality. And I wanted the arm of Alistair to be kind of like caught in it. And so, yeah, because I imagine that the big love triangles between Alistair, the Cheshire Cat, and the Mad Hatter, those are sort of the three that most people in the fandom are like competing against. And then you have that one random person that's like, no, I ship Alistair with the blue caterpillar or whatever. But these are the finished illustrations. I think, yeah, it really came together quickly because it was just a lot of adjusting the colors at the very end of it. I really love the detailing I did on the chessboard, but also the background for the Red Queen's castle. And then this beautiful moment with like the March hare not being too creepy or too cute. And yeah, these are the characters. This is what I did. Yeah, comment down below which one of the characters is your favorite and what you thought of my thought process as I took you along for my redesigning of these characters. And if you want to support the channel, also, why don't you hit a subscribe, hit a like. And if you really want to make sure that these videos keep coming out, check me out on Patreon, link down below, where for just $4 a month, you can have your name in the end credits. And speaking of end credits, here they are now. Special thanks to Anna Sophia Boyd, Axelius the Great, Bodhi, Blue Uwu, Bobby, Beck, Cake Daniel, K Clark, Christopher, Dabdudu, Aaron Martin, Dax Quinn, Emma Wee, Gay Jarris, J Johar, JD Boy 2000, Johan, Elizabeth, Hudis, Laka2, Geek Girls Rule, Kitsune Chibiko, Lucky Paradox, Melon, Mild Mothman, Mistake, Native Runner, Orion Amastasia, Pinecone, Potion Cellar Door, Rin, Scorching Ray, Sir Camelot, Small Sax Jammer, Shenanigans, Tad the Turtle, Tarthliner, The Real Michael, Thumper Daytime, Tony, Tortilla Chips Tuesdays Anyways, Tuncher Katie Bean, and Tuppence Pies. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Nathan, and I'll upload a new video real soon. Bye!